quick action saves one of Christianity's most sacred sites. What happened today at the Church of the Nativity?
It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution.
The mind of a killer. We take a look at what may have motivated the man behind this weekend shooting spree in California. President Obama encourages students to strive for success, what the president said about the importance of science in the classroom. Plus, a complete wrap-up of the Pope's historic trip to the Holy Land. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, May 27th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. I'm Brian Patrick. Thank you for joining us tonight. As we look at news now, one of the most important sites in Christianity is safe tonight. But a small fire threatened the Church of the Nativity earlier today. That church marks the site where sacred tradition tells us Jesus was born. A priest at the church says it was just an accident. A candle apparently fell into some curtains, which caught fire. The fire was quickly put out, but smoke damaged some of the walls. Well, Pope Francis was in that very church just days ago. He reached out to Jews and Muslims during his Holy Land pilgrimage, but Christians in the town where Jesus was born also felt the excitement. EWTN News Nightly's Susie Pinto was there and has our report tonight.
It was Christmas in Bethlehem on Sunday, and residents of this town, known all over the world, celebrated with Pope Francis. It was a moment of great joy and consolation for Christians and Muslims here who want their autonomy from Israel. And Pope Francis lent them his support.
Pope Francis has just offered his house in the Vatican for an encounter between Israeli President Shimon Peres and Palestinian Authority Mahmoud Abbas. Again, Pope Francis never fails to surprise us.
But there was much more than politics going on. This was a chance for Catholics here to worship with their shepherd. Thousands of Palestinians gathered in the town's square for Mass. The atmosphere was intimate and emotional for a group who doesn't always fit in. But these Christians have a strong will and are fighting for their place. As the Mass ends, they rally around their goal, a state of their own, separate from Israel. And on this day, their hopes are buoyed by a humble man in white who has now put peace in the Middle East squarely on his agenda. Susie Pinto in Bethlehem, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, we'll have more from our Holy Land team in just a little bit, but now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Wild weather is popping up in different parts of the country this week. In North Dakota, investigators are assessing the strength of a tornado that injured 9 people and damaged 15 trailers at a workers' camp in the heart of that state's booming oil patch. The twister touched down last night in western North Dakota. Plywood and debris were scattered across several hundred square feet. One person is critically injured but is expected to survive. In Texas, severe thunderstorms continue dumping heavy rain from southern to central Texas. Yesterday, some areas got up to 6 inches of rain, turning streets into lakes. The rain is welcome in parts of that state where there's been a drought. In Colorado, the search for 3 missing ranchers is now being called off. The ranchers disappeared after a mountain collapsed and sent mud sliding for miles. The local sheriff says the slide remains too unstable to try to continue the search. The mudslide came after days of heavy rain. And the University of California at Santa Barbara is declaring today a day of mourning and reflection. The college canceled classes as the community remembers the lives of 6 of its students.
And I just thought it was like an airsoft gun or something, so I was like, hey, like, what up? And I turned around and I started walking the other way.
22-year-old Elliot Rodger took to the UC Santa Barbara campus in his BMW for a violent rampage on Friday. He shot and killed 3 students after stabbing 3 people to death in his apartment building. Rodgers then apparently put the gun to himself, bringing the death toll to 7. Just before the rampage, the gunman posted a disturbing YouTube video warning of his plan.
Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this.
Elliot is the son of Hollywood director Peter Rodger. The family's attorney says he was diagnosed at an early age with Asperger's syndrome. He also said multiple therapists have been concerned with his health lately. A new ruling on how the death penalty is applied. Today's Supreme Court opinion says states have to use more than just IQ test scores to determine if death row inmates with borderline mental disability are eligible for execution. Justice Anthony Kennedy issued the majority opinion, saying the tests have a margin of error. Because of that, the court ruled that people who fall within that margin of error have to be given a chance to present other evidence of mental disability. Democratic Senate candidates in Texas are making their last bid for votes in that state's primary runoff campaign. Today, voters are deciding between David Alamiel and Keisha Rogers. Neither got enough votes during the Democratic primary to move up to the general election. The winner tonight will face Republican Senator John Cornyn in the fall. We're watching some important elections in other countries as well. Our Wyatt Goolsby is following those for us tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, there is a lot going on around the world. Egypt is the latest. Today they wrapped up the second of 3 days in their presidential election. We've also been watching what some are calling a shakeup in the European Union, but the biggest is Ukraine's presidential election. Their president-elect has wasted no time in promising to talk with Moscow to try to end the ongoing violence. As the fighting between the Ukraine military and pro-Russian militants continue, the country's new president-elect, Petro Poroshenko, promised to negotiate an end to the insurgency.
Russia is our biggest neighbor, and because of the fact that stopping the war and bringing the peace to the whole Ukraine and bringing stability on the eastern part of Ukraine, that would be impossible without participation of Russian representatives.
The final votes from Sunday's election came in Monday. Poroshenko, a billionaire candy tycoon, claimed 54%. Now he faces a bigger challenge, getting insurgents to release their hold on government buildings in the eastern part of the country. Meanwhile, a landmark election in the United Kingdom.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you, and then you win. Yeah!
The UK's Independence Party claimed a victory in Sunday's election. Voters across Europe cast ballots to decide the makeup of the next European Parliament. This party is actually opposed to the EU, but represents a growing amount of political force against the organization's laws and system. And finally, Egypt extended its presidential election an extra day due to a lower than expected turnout. The election is all but certain to go to the country's former military chief, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who ousted the nation's first democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, nearly a year ago. It has been a busy week in a variety of other countries as well. Ukraine seems to be having the biggest immediate impact on the international stage. President Obama has already made a phone call to the president-elect and will meet with him next week while on a trip to Europe. Meanwhile, Russian authorities also say they want to meet with the new president-elect, and so Brian will continue to follow the story and see if there's any progress made as a result of these upcoming meetings.
Well, Wyatt, Ukraine's president-elect has a long, difficult road ahead as he tries to end the violence in that country. At least 40 people were killed during a fight for the airport in Donetsk over the weekend. We're told tonight that number could actually rise. The Ukrainian military used combat jets and helicopters to fight off an attempted takeover of the airport. The mayor of Donetsk wants people to stay home to try to avoid that violence. It was a close call for weapons inspectors working with the UN in Syria. Their convoy came under attack today. The team was traveling to a rebel-held town that was the site of a reported gas attack last month. That group now reports that all staff members are okay tonight. President Barack Obama will try to keep nearly 10,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan after the war formally ends later this year. Today, the president announced plans to greatly reduce forces in the next 2 years. He says nearly all troops are supposed to be out by the end of 2016, turning the page on more than a decade of war.
We have to recognize Afghanistan will not be a perfect place, and it is not America's responsibility to make it one. The future of Afghanistan must be decided by Afghans.
The 2-year plan is contingent on the Afghan government signing a bilateral security agreement with the U.S. In Nigeria, Boko Haram is suspected of carrying out 2 new deadly attacks today. This is the group behind the kidnapping of hundreds of schoolgirls from Nigeria. Today's attacks have left dozens dead, including 24 soldiers and 21 police officers. And there's a battle brewing in that country about how to rescue those kidnapped schoolgirls. A defense official says he knows where the girls are, but the military doesn't want to use force to rescue the hostages, preferring negotiation instead. Meanwhile, Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan won't agree to prisoner exchanges, as some have suggested. So now officials are trying to figure out how to move forward without endangering any more lives. Coming up, a Vatican investigation into misappropriating funds, what Pope Francis is saying. And the Holy Land is a land of conflict. Alan Holdren looks at the pilgrimage of Pope Francis as a step toward peace there. On Tuesday, May 27th, this is EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and about 15 million euros is missing from the Vatican Bank. Pope Francis says he wants to know what happened to it. The Vatican has denied previously there's a criminal investigation against former Secretary of State Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone. But the Boston Globe's John Allen reports that Pope Francis confirmed accusations against Cardinal Bertone involving financial irregularities are being looked into. The Pope says, though, he's still not clear exactly what happened to the money. The Pope's trip to the Holy Land has come and gone, but not before making a major impact on people of all over the world of all faiths. Our report tonight comes from Alan Holdren, who was there with the Holy Father.
2 walls, 1 story, and a Pope with a radical message. Peace. After a whirlwind tour of Jordan, Palestine, and Israel, the question remains, is lasting peace possible? At the wall that separates Israel and Palestine, this gesture against terrorism drew criticism and praise. And at the only wall that remains of the ancient temple, called the Wailing Wall, another powerful act, another flashpoint.
I would imagine and even analyze that the majority are delighted. I think that they're delighted that a man has come and spoken the truth and is now trying to find ways to bring people together to serve as a bridge. But of course not everybody is delighted, and the effects of this visit are going to depend on how closely have we listened, how closely have we interiorized a discourse which is certainly not political.
It's the Holy Land, but it's a land of contradiction. It's a land of conflict. And as the Pope left last night, what stuck with people was a powerful gesture. A hug between a Catholic, a Jew, and a Muslim. And that has sparked some hope.
His reactions were really the reaction of the spiritual and the human leader. And that is very important for me as the mayor of Bethlehem. We're not alone.
Alan Holdren in Jerusalem, EWTN News Nightly.
All right, thanks for the excellent coverage, Alan. And just as he did returning from World Youth Day in Rio, Pope Francis again spoke candidly with reporters on the plane back to the Vatican yesterday. Our Jason Calvi continues our special coverage tonight. Jason, what did the Pope say?
Well, Brian, he talked about priestly sexual abuse, and that gained a lot of the media attention, but he talked about a lot more. He talked about the possibility of one day resigning. He talked about religious persecution and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
On the flight from Tel Aviv to Rome, Pope Francis talks with journalists traveling on board. He answered 11 questions for more than 40 minutes. The Holy Father tackled the issue of clerical sex abuse.
On this issue, we must go forward, zero tolerance.
The Holy Father says he and Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley will meet and say Mass at the Vatican, joined with abuse victims. On the issue of priestly celibacy, the Pope says he greatly appreciates it. He says it's a gift for the Church. He adds that since it's not a dogma, the door is always open. One journalist asked the Pope if he would ever consider resigning. Pope Francis gave the example of Benedict XVI.
I believe that a bishop of Rome, a pope that feels his strength is weakening, because we live for a long time, no? He will have to ask himself the same questions that Pope Benedict asked himself.
On Holy Land peace, the Holy Father says he can't say what should be done, but that the parties must negotiate with honesty, fraternity, and great trust. The Holy Father will host a meeting at the Vatican next month with the Israeli and Palestinian presidents.
We will meet together to pray only, and then each one will return home. But I believe that prayer is important.
The Holy Father talked about the persecution of Christians, calling them martyrs. He said in some places it's forbidden to wear a crucifix or teach the catechism to children. And one reporter asked the Pope about the ongoing sainthood case of Pope Pius XII, who reigned during World War II.
I checked, and there still is no miracle. As long as there aren't miracles, it cannot go forward. It is on hold there.
But the Holy Father has bent the saint-making rules. Pope John XXIII was named a saint without a second miracle attributed to his intercession. Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Jason. Stephen Wyatt with the Ethics and Public Policy Center is back with us tonight for some analysis of the Pope's pilgrimage. Certainly got a lot of publicity. This is a very important trip. Put it into context for us. What is the significance in the world picture right now of this pilgrimage?
Yeah, well, everybody wants to talk about this sort of through a political lens, which is the normal way we address most topics. And the Pope insisted and repeated again that this isn't a political trip. This is a purely religious trip. Now, we all know that religion has an impact on politics and has an influence. It reverberates through sort of all areas of life. But I think that the Pope's emphasis on this being a pilgrimage and arriving, you saw him emphasize friendship a lot. You saw him talk about it. You saw him embrace his friends. And I think his message is that peace talks or political movements have to begin with strong personal relationships. And I think his example was to focus on the personal relationships that can form a basis for a stronger solution to a lot of other problems.
But this is a brilliant man. He knows that everything he does and says is being watched very closely. So he knows that even though this was a pilgrimage, a religious trip, it has further significance.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you saw him try and balance attention to Palestinian concerns and Israeli concerns. I thought he did a pretty good job of that. He didn't deeply offend anybody. But again, I think the most poignant moments were those moments, we saw the images of him praying at the Western Wall and leaving and embracing his two friends. It wasn't just an imam and a rabbi, but they were friends of his that he knew from Argentina who were there with him. And I think that he underscored the personal element. He talks about a culture of engagement and encounter, and I think he's showing that by example. You have to begin with these human relationships. How do we encounter one another? Without having that as a strong foundation, all the rest of it sort of falls apart.
Stephen, what about the image of him laying his head down against the barrier that separates Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and that was just a picture that is going all over the world, is going viral. It's a very moving picture, but it's deeper than that, isn't it? What is he saying here?
Well, there's a sadness to human division. There's a sadness to the suffering of the Palestinian people, but there's also a sadness that the Israelis feel the need to be able to put up a wall to protect their own people from acts of terrorism. And these divisions aren't resolved by just simply taking one side or another, but we can still be sad and pray for healing in what's clearly a deeply divided situation.
So the leaders of Palestine and Israel have accepted an invitation to come to the Vatican to pray with the Holy Father. In Alan Holdren's interview, he indicated that this was something the Holy Father really was hoping to do on the trip, but this may turn out to be even more beneficial because they're going to his place, basically.
Right. It'll be a neutral ground for the two men who'll be coming to visit him, and I think that he knows he's not an expert in world politics, and he's not going to try and negotiate some political solution. I think, again, what he wants is to bring people together to engage on a human level, to get past talking points, and try and find if there's some kind of human connection that we can be the basis for trust. Without trust, all the rest of the negotiations are going to fall apart. Whether he'll be able to do that or not is up to that, but they'll be praying, so there's always hope.
Yeah, and he's very effective in at least getting people behind him. He's got an interesting and wonderful style. Stephen Wyatt, thanks for joining us again tonight.
Thanks to be here.
Up next, students get to explain their science projects at the White House. Also, the U.S. soccer team hits the field to prepare for next month's World Cup. Thank you for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. An admitted computer hacker who helped the FBI thwart hundreds of cyber attacks will get no more prison time. Hector Javier Monsegur was sentenced today in Manhattan to the time he's already served, just 7 months. Prosecutors have credited him with helping cripple a group of so-called hacktivists known as Anonymous. Prosecutors say he agreed to cooperate 3 years ago in a widespread hacking investigation involving government and corporate computer systems. He's since faced threats, and he actually had to relocate. President Obama drew attention to girls' science and engineering accomplishments today, announcing new efforts to diversify America's technological workforce. At the White House Science Fair, the president pointed out that men outnumber women studying and working in the science field. He said women earn fewer than 1 in 5 bachelor's degrees in engineering and computer science. He announced a new $35 million Education Department competition to train the best math and science teachers. He also announced an expansion of AmeriCorps to help teach science and math courses to 18,000 low-income students this summer. Here to talk about the importance of science for boys and girls is the co-director of CASE, the Carnegie Academy for Science Education, Dr. Toby Hahn. Dr. Toby, why is science such an important area for children to learn?
Well, first of all, it's really interesting, and secondly, it provides a wide range of analytical skills that we need in today's world, and we needed it in yesterday's world as well. Learning how to read newspapers and be critical, think about whether the information you're getting is the best information, being able to analyze options, taking care of the math for keeping your recipes straight and keeping your house in order.
We have so many new tools. Do you think that these devices that we have, the computer world, helps in getting children interested in science, or does it hurt?
Well, it gives children access to information, but they still need to be able to experience how that information came to be. And there was just a report today that most of what's on Wikipedia is not really accurate. And it's the analytical skills that you learn by actually conducting experiments.
So in researching online, you need to know what to look for and how to look for it. Do you agree with the president's assessment today that there's a big gender imbalance in the science field?
Indeed. And it hasn't been a friendly place for girls for a long time. I used to get away with things because of my name being Toby, which is an androgynous kind of name. But girls have as much intelligence and creativity as boys. And we're seeing a lot of girls going into medicine, but not showing up as much in engineering and basic science research, where a lot of the creativity and persistence is needed.
What do you think we as parents, even grandparents, can do to encourage this?
A big thing is to help your child explore nature and explore cooking and try and be systematic about trying things out.
So cooking is like chemistry almost, huh?
Exactly.
Mixing stuff up.
Exactly.
As long as it doesn't explode.
Well, that's why cooking is really good, because you can study lots of things that way.
All right, Dr. Toby Hahn, thank you so much for your insight tonight.
It's a
We appreciate
pleasure.
it. Well, the First Lady also got into the act today. Michelle Obama talked this afternoon about getting healthier lunches in schools. During her White House speech, Michelle Obama pointed out that some schools have succeeded when they put higher health standards in place. The U.S. soccer team's getting ready to take on the competition ahead of next month's World Cup in Sao Paulo. The U.S. team is set to play Azerbaijan at San Francisco's Candlestick Park today. The U.S. team is playing a series of games before going to Brazil next month for the World Cup. Team USA's first game in Brazil is set for June 16th against Ghana. We thank you for joining us tonight. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. You can catch us 5 nights a week now here on EWTN and anytime you want on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Thanks for watching tonight. Good night and God bless you.